Welcome to Stop the Fight. And today we are discussing the post-fight, Jake Paul, Woodley, and all the other big fights of the weekend. Are you ready? Let's go! All right, so I'm going to be honest. Every single underdog that we picked had lost. And some of it wasn't even particularly close. It happens that way. You know, sometimes you think you have a good read on a situation, on a fighter, on an outcome. You think this is where you're going to go win on an underdog. And, you know, they're an underdog for a reason. And I think, let's start with the Beterbiev fight. This one proved, I think I was maybe too bleak on, too bearish, as they say, on Beterbiev. He's a very physically stout guy, very strong. On the inside, very strong, very short punches. Maybe I just underestimated him. I did think that he was losing the Gvozdyk fight until those knockdowns, but Marcus Browne is just, I think I was too bullish Browne, too bearish Beterbiev on this, and that's why I think I was really burned there. Also, congratulations to those who took the under 8.5 because it just made the cut. I think it ended at 224, something like that, 224 in the ninth round. Remember, 8.5 means you have to go to a minute and 30 seconds. So about 50 seconds to spare. Congratulations to those. I know one of my friends. Congratulations to those who bet on the under 8.5. It worked out for you guys. Almost even money. Good stuff. Good stuff. Now let's talk about the actual fight. I mean, forget about the fact there was a giant gash on Beterbiev's forehead. Marcus Browne was cut as well. But in the first two rounds, watching the first two rounds, I was like, man, maybe he can actually do it. But then I noticed, because Marcus Browne was boxing pretty well. I think Beterbiev was very tentative. I think he was just trying to figure it out, trying to look at the southpaw angles that Marcus Browne was giving him. But as the fight wore on, you saw Marcus Browne enter the ropes. And in the third round, I thought, which was the last really kind of close round of the fight, you saw Marcus Browne start to touch the ropes consistently. And that against any power puncher is always a danger. I don't care how good you are defensively. And Marcus Browne is obviously not that good defensively. He's not bad, but he's certainly not good enough to be laying on the ropes. He found himself on the ropes consistently. And I remember saying it to my wife. I think that this is Marcus Browne is in big trouble. I think it was probably around the fourth round, right after the cut had opened up. And I thought that if they stopped it right then and there, you probably get a draw, right? Because I think after it cleared 4, I thought that you maybe Marcus Browne get a draw. Maybe if he's lucky in the game, the third, he gets a win. But I thought that the longer this fight goes on, if he's not able to take advantage of that cut, that he will be walked down by the more stronger and more powerful Beterbiev. And as he started to land the ropes, it just became evident that Marcus Browne just could not handle the ferocity, the power. Like, Beterbiev was much stronger than Browne physically. Forget about punching power, which was also an issue for Browne. He was physically weaker than Beterbiev. He winds up going down in the 7th and then in the 9th round where he finally gets stopped. I thought it was a good stoppage. I thought Marcus Browne, honestly the fight could have even stopped earlier. Maybe he didn't even have to. He could have been stopped after that first knockdown in the 7th round, simply because it looked like Marcus Browne just did not have the feet to move away from Beterbiev. He would just lay on the ropes, and once he got to those ropes, you knew it was going to be over. Beterbiev just too strong, too powerful. Now 17-0 with 17 knockouts. I guess you have to say he's the guy to beat at light heavyweight. I believe. I don't know who else you would think is a stronger light heavyweight. Certainly not Callum Smith. I'm looking at the light heavyweight rankings. You have Smith, Beterbiev, Bivol, Smith Jr., Ramirez, who also fought. Obviously, Vlasov, Browne, Barrera, Yard. Gonzalez, who also just fought this weekend. We have some okay fighters. No one particularly. I don't think Kovalev has enough in him to mount another run. So no one particularly monstrous. And I'll talk about it. Why? I know some people are going to say that maybe maybe Ramirez, but Ramirez, he showed us a couple of little holes in this game. Let's say that much. So you have Beterbiev now, turning aside, what's his name? Turning aside Marcus Brown, and I think he should be the consensus number one light heavyweight. Obviously, people are going to say, well, what about Bivol? I believe Bivol is probably too small, to tell you the truth. I believe he's probably too small, even though he'll be actually a little bit taller than Beterbiev. But it's not just about the height in and of itself. Weight classes aren't measured in height. They're measured in weight, hence weight classes. And what we wind up having over here is a guy who may be a little bit taller, Beterbiev, but physically looks significantly smaller than him in Bivol. So I think any potential fight between Beterbiev and Bivol has to be favored. You have to be favoring Beterbiev. You just have to be. You see that, as you saw Marcus Brown, without power, without enough pop to dissuade Beterbiev from pressing on the ropes and just doing what he wants to do, it's a lost fight. You need that pop. And I don't think Bivol at 19-0 with 11 knockouts has the pop to keep Beterbiev off. He has to basically box flawlessly for 12 rounds. And I believe, similar with the Joe Smith Jr. fight, Bivol will eventually be caught by the bigger and stronger, well, let's say wider, more stout, Beterbiev. For Marcus Brown, well, I think there's the potential rematch with Jean Pascal. After, obviously Jean Pascal has been suspended for the steroid. But Jean Pascal, about a jack, they can run it back again. I know Battle Jack's now a cruiserweight, but he's not a natural cruiser. He doesn't have much pop, or he's not that big really for light heavy. And I believe he's very beatable right now. He's 38 years old. Like I said, I believe he was vulnerable light heavyweight, and I believe he's a vulnerable cruiserweight. And that's why he lost to Jean Pascal. He lost to Marcus Brown himself. And, so there are fights for Marcus Brown, but at his current shape, like if he were to fight Bivol, he doesn't box well enough. His feet aren't fast enough, and I wouldn't favor him against Bivol. So I think, unfortunately, as long as Beterbiev and Bivol are in the light heavyweight picture, you're gonna wind up having just Marcus Brown be locked out of the light heavyweight championship landscape. Now let's talk about the other underdog who we bet on, who unfortunately lost, and lost wide. Some of the widest scorecards that I would score, and I think the judges were completely insane to have it as close as they did. It was Derek Chisora against Joseph Parker. Now, I was pretty vocal about taking this. I think I said this is the one that I'm most confident in. Well, this was nowhere near their first encounter. I believe Joseph Parker won almost every single round. I think all but one. I think I gave Derek Chisora one round. That isn't to say he was particularly uncompetitive. He was relatively competitive in all the rounds, except obviously the ones that he kept going down with. And he went down 3 times, guys, in this fight. 3 times did he go down in this fight, and he was competitive, but he seemed to be very clearly this time a step below. And I think with Joseph Parker, with Andy Lee in Joseph Parker's corner, we have a completely kind of retooled Parker. He was much better, tentative as always. He's got the Parker issues, Parker's Parker, but a much better Parker than the last time we've seen him out. I think without question. And I think with Derek Chisora now at 37 with this much mileage on him. Remember, he's 32-12, so you're thinking, well, that's only 44 fights. But guys, this has been 40, and many of these fights at a very high level, a lot of damage. You think about the Dillian White 2 times. You think about what's his name, Vitaly Klitschko. There's been so many. Tyson Fury twice. There's been so many fights. David Haye, which was an insane fight at the time. Split decision losses to Hellenius. He's had a long career fighting top guys. Derek Chisora does, and he's, I said it somewhere else, but he's a little bit like a poor man's Povetkin. He's a hooking kind of guy, except his hooks are wide. He doesn't have as much stamina, nor as much power, nor the speed. He's basically Povetkin, but Povetkin very light, right? I don't think he probably wins a championship in any era, unfortunately. He is really a journeyman fighter who is a very, very, very good gatekeeper. He's like one of those C+, B- kind of guys who if you sleep on him, he can cause you some trouble, like he did to Joseph Parker in his last fight. But when like a B or A guy is really on their game, they're just gonna. He's never really gonna get the job done. His stamina, especially now at 37, is very suspect. There are points where it seemed like, especially that last knockdown, and I think it was in the 8th or the 9th. It looked like Derek Chisora just fell over because he was tired. He was like kind of pushed and he held himself up on the ropes, but he really is a fighter who's always gonna be in a good fight, but you know, he's won 2 fights for every one that he's lost, right? That's what 32-12 really tells you, approximately. You know, he's a little better than that, but let's say he's won 3 out of every 4 fights that he fights. But nonetheless, you know, I think it's time for him to probably hang it up. I think he doesn't need it. I know he's saying he wants to fight in the summer, but I think this should be really it. He's made a good amount of cash, and if he's just wise with his investments, which again, you're asking a sportsman to hold on to their money, you know. It's like asking a hungry dog not to eat the food you put in front of it. So I hope Derek Chisora the best. I do hope that he probably hangs him up with 12 losses, 3 by knockout. You think that maybe this is it for the Del Boy, but you know, like I said, he wants to fight in the summer, so maybe he continues fighting. As for Joseph Parker, well, he looks like he's a retooled guy. At points, he fought brilliantly off his back foot. He fought well off his front foot. He had pop in his shots. He was a Joseph Parker that you hear some of its more hype men talk about. But like I said, he is, you know, he looked good. Like I said, he looked good. And where does he go from here? Our man Joseph Parker. Retooled, you know. He's young. You have to remember, at 6'4", he's only 29 years old. This is a sizable heavyweight who clearly has, you know, his hand speed is there. You watch Joseph Parker's hands fly, and you realize that he really does have some legit hand speed. He has legit talent for boxing. It just sometimes, I guess, maybe he's not motivated or what it is. When you watch his fights against like Junior Fa and Alex Lepai, and you're wondering like Terrell Winters, like who is he fighting? You know, he nearly won the fight against Dillian White. He did well in the fight against Anthony Joshua. Victories over Huey Fury, over Andy Ruiz, over Dimitrenko, over Takam. Like, he is a good heavyweight. He is one that I believe, at least because of his hand speed, he should be able to trouble anyone. I don't think Joseph Parker's an easy out. Yes, I chose Chisora heavy against him, but, you know, I see now a motivated Parker, and this is a different fighter than the Parker from the last 3 fights. So I guess the heavyweight picture for him is wide open. Now, guys, let's talk about Mr. Jake Paul against Tyronn Woodley. Horrendous fight, atrocious fight, amazing knockout. Maybe even knockout of the year due to the nature. Again, remember, knockouts of the year, it's not just about who's got the best knockout, but it's about the stage. Part of the reason why Povetkin and White was the knockout of the year of 2020 was because it derailed White from a championship, from a heavyweight fight, from a title fight, from a heavyweight title fight. White, the guy who had finally crawled all the way back, all he has to do was beat this old Povetkin, and he's got it knocked out in brutal fashion. So not only does a knockout of the year have to be brutal, it also has to be significant, an event. And in this case, you know, this was an event. A Jake Paul fight now is an event in the boxing world. Hell, in the fight world, given that it's MMA guys that consistently look to get knocked out by by Jake Paul. So, you know, on a big stage, on a Showtime pay-per-view with the entire fight world watching, you wind up having a horrendous fight. A fight which was, you know, would show that neither Tyronn Woodley nor Jake Paul are really boxers, although I think it was more offensive for Tyronn, who seemed to be really holding on. He was doing better in the sense where he wasn't getting hit in this fight like he was in the first fight. In the first fight, it seemed like Tyronn was just getting jabbed the entire time. But he wasn't throwing any punches because he was clinching the entire time. He landed a few shots on Jake, but he didn't seem to carry much power, Tyronn. And in the 6th round, Jake Paul wound up from like the other side of the moon with a right hand and shot it and just put Tyronn to sleep. One shot, blast, pow! Knocked him right out. Knocked him right out. It was a highlight reel KO. It would have been for any fighter. And given the stage, given the fact that this is his 5th pro fight, given the fact that Tyronn Woodley has been a professional fighter, sure, not boxer, but fighter for 20 years. I read someone say, like, even if you want to say that Jake Paul's been training boxing for 3 years, like, Tyronn Woodley has been doing MMA for 20 years. Do you not think over the course of 20 years he's done an unbelievable amount of boxing? Hell, he's trained in the Wild Card gym with Freddie Roach. He knows how to box. He just got knocked out, though, by a YouTuber. Unfortunately for Tyronn Woodley, it is embarrassing. I will tell you this much, though. Tyronn Woodley was undersized, significantly undersized, compared to Jake Paul. Jake Paul is just a bigger guy. Jake Paul at 6'1" is a sizable guy. He's at 6'1", he's relatively lanky. Sure, it looks like maybe you can come down maybe 5, maybe 10 pounds at most. But Tyronn Woodley looked like he can be fighting 168 pounds. Tell you the truth. Tyronn was 5'9". He was significantly smaller than Jake Paul in there. He was wide, but he looked like he could have easily been a super middleweight. He's got the height of Canelo, fighting at 190 pounds. So I think part of the reason, well, actually, he weighed in 185, but part of the reason I think he's getting knocked out, he's losing, is he's fighting a much bigger guy. Even if he has trained more boxing than Jake Paul over the course of his life, he's a much smaller guy fighting a much bigger guy. And you want to say congratulations to Jake Paul, and say, well, where does Jake Paul go here? Does he fight a professional boxer? Guys, I keep telling you, no. Jake Paul is a money entry. He's a prize fighter. He's not a professional boxer looking to climb the pound for pound ranking. No. He's going to fight a Nate Diaz or a Masvidal. And he may knock those guys out too. And this is honestly getting embarrassing for these guys. Like if he knocks out Nate Diaz or Nick Diaz, whatever Diaz, and one of the brothers, if he knocks him out, do you know how embarrassed he will be? Guys, I don't give a fuck who wins. Sounds like a fucking idiot. But if he gets knocked out by Jake Paul, he will be a fucking idiot. So, like Jake Paul is continuing his rise. And again, with every fight, he's going to keep getting better, guys. He's going to keep getting better. That's what happens when you do something. I said it in the last episode. If you keep doing something over and over and over every day, you're going to get better at it. Especially if you increase difficulty. As Jake Paul increases the difficulty of fighter he fights, the difficulty of sparring he goes through, the difficulty of training. Because remember, boxing, one of those sports, it's very easy to scale higher. When you start off, you bring in nobodies or really advanced fighters who are really just throwing jabs at you. Then you get a little bit better, you start bringing in low-rank contenders to spar with you. As you get better, you start bringing in maybe top MMA guys, maybe mid-rank contenders. As you start getting good, you start sparring other up-and-comers and maybe champs. It's very easy to bring in very high-level fighters if you need to. So you can always fight against someone who's better than you and always get better at the sport. So everyone who's trying to just pick off Tyronn Woodley, especially in the Jake Paul, especially in the MMA world, your time is running out. Your time is running out. I don't know for how much longer the best of the stand-up striking guys can beat Jake Paul in the boxing match, but I'll tell you this much, it'll probably be 0 in another 2 or 3 fights. If right now, people are saying, oh, Masvidal's a fighter. Masvidal's a fighter. He's a striker. So is the Diaz brother. So are the Diaz brothers. But with every passing year, with every passing fight, with every passing sparring session that Jake Paul does, it is that much less likely that an MMA striker beats him. And I know they're saying, oh, what about Kareem Usman? If Usman goes and fights Jake Paul, there's a good chance he gets knocked out too. That's just the truth. That's just the truth of the matter. It's just the truth of the matter. And at this point, as I learned from the Ben Askren fight, you underestimate Jake Paul at your own peril, as I did. I thought there was no way a professional fighter loses to Jake Paul. And then I watched Ben Askren get knocked out. Highlight reel style. This boy, Jake Paul is building a highlight reel, a highlight knockout reel. and that he is. And I'm not sitting here hyping Jake Paul to be some great boxer. He isn't, but against the level of opposition that you guys are giving him, he's winning he's winning those that you put in he's winning against those you put in front of him. He's actually knocking them out as well. I don't think there's been a fighter that has not been knocked out by Jake Paul. He has fought. Tyronn Woodley is now in the second fight, was knocked out. Every single man that Jake Paul has fought, he has knocked out. At some point, it's not just luck anymore. It's a fighter putting in the work and getting better at the craft, and I think you do see it. The only thing I will say about Jake Paul is that he is showing vulnerability in stamina. Again, it could be that he's just not a boxer, and he's a party guy. You know, when you're talking about elite level stamina, and this is for fighters, if you are a party person, you're never going to build up the stamina necessary. Although he may not need to. Again, he clearly carries power. Say what you want about Jake Paul, but he clearly carries power. He does. He's lanky and he carries power. So, and all those, everyone's saying like, oh, he should go to MMA, like, where he'll get destroyed. Guys, if he takes on like meme fights in MMA, he may win those too. He's an Ohio State wrestler. Ohio State wrestler, exactly. From what I understand, the Midwest has like the toughest wrestling states, and he's like Division I there. If he knows how to wrestle and he knows how to strike, guys, that's basically MMA. Everyone's like, oh, do some jiu-jitsu. Yeah, whatever. If you can't, like, in other words, if he can take you down, if he can outstrike you standing up and take you down due to wrestling or prevent your takedowns, you have a lot of trouble. He's going to wind up beating some no-name in MMA too. I mean, not some no-name, but some no-fighter in MMA with a big name. I'd take him right now to beat what's it called? Who's that guy? CM Punk. Careful, guys. And finally, let's talk about Gilberto Ramirez Zurdo, who is now 43-0 with 29 knockouts. Wound up knocking out Yuneski Gonzalez in a fight in which, honestly, Yuneski, or Mr. Gonzalez, did better than anticipated, at least in my eyes. He did well in the first round, but it seemed like his giant muscular frame just completely slowed him down. But he was still able to land some hellacious shots on Zurdo, on Mr. Ramirez. And, you know, you look at a fight like that, and you look at the kind of damage that Zurdo was able to take from Gonzalez, and you have to ask yourself, what would Beterbiev do if that was him in there? And I think we know, and I think, you know, Ramirez is going to look or is more vulnerable now than he was a fight ago. I think if you had questions about him a fight ago, you have more questions about him now. Yeah, he's a strong guy. Yeah, he can box, but he is defensively very vulnerable. He gets too low, and he blocks many punches with his face, as he did. There were times I was just screaming at the TV, telling Gonzalez, you just have to throw the right hand. Follow Zurdo as he turns left. He's always turning left with his hands down, and numerous times he would land overhand rights and left hooks, did Gonzalez on Ramirez. So, do I think it's a good fight for Canelo to take? I will tell you this much, that Ramirez is significantly bigger than Canelo at 6'2.5". Significantly. Much wider fighter. I don't think there's a need. I don't think pound for pound they're even close. You know, Canelo obviously vying for that number one spot. Actually, he is number one pound for pound. Ramirez isn't anywhere near that. And can Ramirez beat Canelo if Canelo fights him at 175? Of course. He's that much bigger, that much stronger. Eventually, the size, in fact, will matter. And I know Canelo's fighting at cruiserweight, but guys, this is like Roy Jones fighting at heavyweight. These are carefully selected, like when Canelo fought Kovalev after the Yard fight. These are carefully selected fights, picked at the right time. Anyway, that was a really awesome boxing weekend. Unfortunately, both our underdog picks wound up losing. You know, we have one more, I think, weekend of fights coming up. We have one more weekend in general. Jeez, talk about time flying. In this year, 2021, and we'll talk about it on a Thursday. It's over!